everybody, Carolina Millan here, and today I am super excited. I have a very special guest, my good friend, mentor, Nik Halik. How are you, Nik?
Hey, Carolina, how are you?
I'm doing awesome, and for the
Good to
few of
see
you,
you.
it's always good to see you, always good to hear you. For the few of you listening or watching who don't know who Nik is, just in a few words I'll tell you, Nik is known as the Thrillionaire. He's an entrepreneurial alchemist, a civilian astronaut, an extreme adventurer, a keynote speaker, and also a book author. We're going to be discussing his latest book, The 5-Day Weekend, among other things. And Nik is, for me, he's like my oracle when it comes to investing, when it comes to a lot of things about entrepreneurship. And I'm happy to call him a friend and a mentor as well. And we met maybe
Awesome.
4 years ago, I think we met, for 2014.
Costa Rica
Yes,
at a MOBE event.
that's
You know what?
right.
That was actually 5 years ago.
It
That was
was 14.
2013.
I think it,
2013.
I think it was 14 because
Was it?
yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 14. I remember.
Wow.
Yeah, at a mastermind over there in Costa Rica. It was I wouldn't forget the date. It was May 2014.
Okay, May. May is a good month.
Absolutely. So I invited Nik here for this interview for the podcast. It's also going to be here on my YouTube channel. So Nik, let's start with the 5-day weekend. You have the book right there, right?
I do the 5-day weekend over here. Basically, how to buy back your time, how to liberate yourself and seeking financial freedom, but also most importantly, living life in your own terms and conditions over here. But more fun, more freedom, more fulfillment, and more quality time with your family and your friends. And that's pretty much the premise of the book. But yeah, a lot of fun, a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
So how was the process of writing the book?
Definitely. Well, for anybody who has never read a book, obviously you need to understand that there's two elements in when you look at writing a book in the first place. Right now, the pendulum has shifted to a we cycle. So a we cycle basically means that people want to hear books that are basically going to assist them and help them and add value to their lives. Where a lot of the books in the 1990s were autobiographies, where it was all about the person themselves. It was more like a me type thing. So currently we're in a we cycle until about 2021, and then the cycle is going to go back to the me cycle, back to the bigger autobiographies and whatever too. So when you're creating a book in the we cycle, it's the reader is looking for a way out. Usually they're sort of stuck in a cul-de-sac. They were promised big things. They went to college. They were hoping to pave their way through the wealth superhighway. Then they got stuck in a rut. Basically, they're attempting to now dig their way out of debt. They got caught up in capitalism, consumerism. Where credit cards are now supplemental income, and not generating enough income, for example, to basically service a life and fund the luxuries of what we know in life, whatever too. But so when you're writing a book, you need to have an element of rarity. It's going to be inimitable, for example, but it's also going to be able to help them break it down. It's going to be very methodical. It's going to be humanistic, and it's going to be very spontaneous as well too. So it's predicated on different modalities, how people think. So there's so much that sort of comes into a book, and actually making sure that you can sort of you encompass the different psychologies of most individuals who are your potential readers, and then clients, and then raving fans, and then affiliates for you.
Brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant. So in a few words, for the people who haven't read the book, by the way, I'm going to put a link somewhere in this episode or in the description so you guys can
Yeah.
grab the book. What are, just as a little summary, but what are the steps or the very first steps somebody needs to take to get to live that lifestyle, which I know you live, and
Yeah,
I'm not there
definitely.
yet, but what are the first few steps somebody, like the average person, needs to take if they want to ever live a 5-day weekend or design their lifestyle?
Yeah, I think you've got to be very, very definitive in relation to what you want, what you desire in life. I mean, I was very, very fortunate. I mean, in retrospect, when I was 8, I drafted the screenplay to my life. So I wrote down my top 10 list of goals, things that I wanted to create and achieve in my life. They were crazy things that only a young 8-year-old could ever possibly write those goals. Because most adults are very statement orientated. Where kids, they question life, they probe, they have this this secret kindling of imagination and curiosity. So kids ask a lot of questions, and I truly believe that they can achieve anything in life. Adults become a lot more contracted in their thinking. They don't have their bandwidth is very narrow. They don't have a very long runway to their life, and it's just basically XQ scientists, and it's all about statements. So I think two most important days in your life: the day you were born, and the day you discovered why you were born. So what's your direction? What exactly do you want to do? Next, the average individual has 2 or 3 particular skills that they can monetize in life, and you've got to find that intersection between passion, between a product or a service that is in demand, and also a level of talent. And you've got to find that healthy intersection and balance in the middle there. And you give 100% to that, because excellence is a commitment to completion. Yeah. And you basically cut every side of retreat, and you just give yourself permission to succeed.
Give yourself permission to succeed. That's a powerful
absolutely.
Sentence.
Because, how many individuals are basically following parked cars? The car's in park, but we're basically following parked cars. At least dogs know when to piss on a parked car. Most individuals, it's like they're doing the same thing over and over again. It's this level of regurgitation, or the law of diminishing intent.
Yeah.
And the next 5 years will be the same as the previous 5 years unless something changes. And a lot of it is just doing a self-audit. Your belief system, your self-esteem, your ambition, your drive. It's your network. And I tell a lot of individuals, how you balance your time. It's very, very important. So what I do, and it's very, I spend a percentage of my time with people that I can coach and mentor, so I can be their guiding light. So I can be like a lighthouse and influence and illuminate their life and education, right? Then the other quadrant of my life is I want to be with people on my same level of knowledge, like-minded souls. And then 50% of my time, it's to be in the orbit of individuals that are transmitting a higher frequency of wisdom than I am. So 25% of my time, I counsel. Others seek my counsel, and I add value to their lives. The other 25% of my time is with people on my same wavelength, and the other 50% of my time is with people that are up here, that I can look up to, because I seek a networking situation where it's very awkward, where I feel I don't know enough. I want to be, the dumbest person. In other words, I want to feel awkward, because when you feel awkward, it means that you're raising your what? Your reticular activating system over here. You're raising your level of awareness.
Yeah.
And, it's the intrinsic knowledge where you're now, you're absorbing at a greater rate, and you're able to sort of expedite it kind of thing. So, but it all comes back to, how you're going to sort of rationalize your life, and, what particular path do you want to follow it? Because here's the thing, 70 or 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 years time, we're going to stop breathing. We'll be fertilizing daffodils. What's your legacy going to be? What's your body of work going to be? Why should anybody give a shit about you? Our parents are biologically programmed to love us. Our siblings are biologically obligated to like us. Yeah. But we live in a very reactionary world. Where everybody has an agenda. When somebody writes an email, it's a reactionary agenda where we always have to address people's emails. We get caught up in a life of business, and what happens is, if this is your core life, just here, right? This is, for most people, that's their job, and everything revolves around their job. What we're talking about, and specifically in the 5-day weekend, is where this is your life, and everything has to revolve around your life, which has its own terms and conditions and its own rules. And rule number 1 is that there are no rules. And rule number 2 is don't forget rule number 1, because everything in life is open to interpretation. As an investor, as an entrepreneur, you have to exhibit behavioral flexibility and adjust and, predicate your human emotions to basically, to be balanced with your surrounding ecosystem, and your environment, and to be able to change your thinking, think outside the box, and just be somewhat creative in relation to what you personally want to achieve in your life.
Powerful, powerful. I think most people need that wake up call, understanding that their life doesn't have to revolve around their job.
No, it's of course not. It's like, as a terrible way to do it, because we were conditioned that way. I mean, think about it. We went to school 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. Academia was an indoctrination to getting a job, because you go to a job 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, 40
Yep.
hours a week.
That's right.
So you're indoctrination. So you're being institutionalized, you're being conditioned at a young age. And we know that academia is a factory assembly plant for the sole purpose of producing taxpayers. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have individuals that go from high school to a 4-year-long summer camp, otherwise known as college, to work out what they want to do in their lives. And then they come out with a mortgage, but with no house. It's called student loan debt.
That's right.
It's insane. Right now in America, $1.4 trillion in student loan debt. Wow. And even if you go bankrupt, you can't get out of that debt. $1.4 trillion in student loan debt. So that means you've now graduated, you're more confused as to what you really want to do. You're now 26 years of age. You've got about $200,000 of debt over your head. Whatever happened to like aerating? Whatever happened to ventilating your mindset? What about traveling around the world?
Yeah.
So you become more mature, be a lot more definitive as to what you want to do in your life over here. I mean, one thing, I grew up in Australia, and one thing in Australia, most individuals are encouraged to travel. So when you finish high school, a lot of parents say, you know what, kids, go overseas, find yourself, then come back, and then go to university, if you choose to go to university. Here, in most places, you're forced to go from high school straight into college for 4, 5, 6 years, and then graduate. You haven't had time to like ventilate or come to the surface and just breathe.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then they don't see 5-day weekend, they just see a 5-day work week. And in most cases, they get caught up in consumer debt, capitalism, and now they're working 6 days a week. And then the Sunday is their only day of an emotional purge, and they're all depressed because they're thinking about going to work the next day again. They've got no investments, they've got no passive income. They're not entrepreneurs. See, entrepreneurs do one thing, and very, very special. That's why I tell everybody in the world, become an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs do not get paid by the hour. Employees get paid by the hour. Entrepreneurs don't get paid by the hour. Entrepreneurs pay themselves first. Employees pay themselves last after they've paid out everybody else.
True.
And what we do as an entrepreneur is this: we get paid to what? Think. Employees working for somebody else get paid to work.
Yep.
Because those who get paid to work for those who get paid to think. And that's a really important distinction. So we don't get paid by the hour, we get paid by the amount of value we bring to that hour. And we get paid to think. Just thinking outside of the box, finding where the demand is for a product or a service over here, creating a product, that has this high level of addiction to it, for example. And then build like a recurring system or like a recurring revenue system over here where people subscribe to it over here. Now you got what? You're given a phenomenal service over here. You're creating passive income over here. Now you utilize that money and you go and invest. So you can increase your passive income. And, if your expenses are $5,000 or $10,000 a month and you're generating $30,000 or $40,000 in passive income, that's not active, that's passive. Well, you now have more time to do what? So you can travel, more fun, more freedom, more fulfillment. I mean, I see your Facebook posts. I mean, you're traveling around the world. You love the great outdoors. I see you love Arizona. You love Utah, wonderful states,
Yep.
But my point is, what a phenomenal way. What if you were to raise kids that way? Not homeschooling, but travel schooling them.
Yeah, it would be amazing.
If they want to see a penguin, let's go to Antarctica. You want to see a pyramid? Let's go to Egypt. Let's get the Supreme Council of all antiquities in Egypt to give us a lesson about Egyptology. That is how you raise kids. Experiential education, experiential living, And it's just that experiential travel. And that's really how you become far more cosmopolitan in life, more diverse in your thinking, more culturally mature. And now you're immersing yourself in different cuisines and languages over here. You have a greater sense of history and understanding, and you just become a far more balanced individual. And you know what? You automatically become an energetic individual. You see, people seek energy, whether it's, drinking Red Bull or popping pills. I have energy. Why? Because I am excited about life. When you're excited about something, that's why I only sleep like 5 or 6 hours a day. I feel guilty if I sleep more than 5 or 6 hours a day, right? Because I feel like I'm wasting time. It irritates me. I'm thinking, shit, I slept 5 hours, Some people need 8 or 9 hours to seek balance. I'm telling you, look, I have a biphasic sleep pattern, okay? So I sleep between midnight and usually 5:30 a.m. And then I have another power siesta, like a power nap for 25 minutes, what I call a stage 2 sleep. 7 hours after I wake up, so about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I have like a 25-minute lie down. That's not a sleep. That is just a nap. It's kind of like recharging your cell phone for 25 minutes. That's all it is. And that is enough to last me up until midnight. Most people in the afternoon, what do? They're feeling a little bit lethargic. They start to yawn. They go for a coffee. Or they, some sugary products, And, sugar is basically, living in an acidic body. And that's where basically cancer thrives. When you're energetic over here, when you're basically hydrating your body over here with alkalinity over here, off the sugars, off the carbs over here. And the great outdoors and just, and earthing. I tell people every day, earthing, go out there and walk barefooted for at least 1 hour every day.
Yeah, I've heard about that. It's amazing.
Feel the energy from the planet. Most of us, we live in all these, these apartments and, we're wearing shoes all day and we don't even go outdoors. People who live in like these big cities, like imagine look, I love New York, I love Manhattan. But they live in apartments. You need the outdoors to breathe that fresh air, drink that fresh water, just to go out there and just be mesmerized by nature. I love nature. I spend a lot of my time just traveling, hiking.
Yeah.
That's what. And once again, when you're in control of your life, when you've brought back your economic freedom, you see, people don't understand. They don't have freedom. They're a slave. Because most individuals, and it's very, very unfortunate, too many individuals, they work in a job of necessity, doing whatever it takes just to survive. See, we used to be able to thrive. Whatever happened to thriving in life? But now we're just merely surviving, just enough to pay the rent or just enough to pay for the food. But whatever happened to thriving? We're all entrepreneurs. The whole notion of the whole notion of a job, of a job, is literally only 120 years old. What were we doing? Our ancestors, our great-great-grandparents, what were they doing? They were entrepreneurs. They were hustling. They were merchants. They were out there. If the economy sucked where they came from, they would jump on a ship, go to the next port, and they'll trade, barter, for example. They were entrepreneurs. They weren't getting paid by the hour. They were getting paid by the amount of value they brought to other people's lives. But now in the last 120 years, we get paid by the hour. We get paid to work. And then we have something called tax, and we're basically servicing tax and liabilities. We have consumerism. We're being marketed to buy, credit card debt. And then all we're basically doing is servicing liabilities, servicing debt, no time to travel, stress, anxiety. We're being ravaged by the environment, ravaged by by the lack of nutrients in food. We're being ravaged by negativity. Sometimes that negativity could also be in a family as well too. The closest people. So it's like anything in life. When you find your base of tranquility and serenity, you got to guard that space. You have to guard it because that's your last line of defense. And I tell people, be very, very careful. Set the parameters as to who you invite into your life. Even provide a one-page questionnaire, or or have them do a personality test. Go to Dark Triad, on the web and do like a personality test so you can define exactly what is their agenda. But you got to be so careful, because a lot of individuals that want to see your downfall, there's a lot of individuals that behind the scenes are a very destructive force in your life. And your life is so important. You're the most qualified. You're the most unique individual in the world. And when you start to work in your life, when you start to define who you are, then pivot to something greater than what you are. And then you become a guiding light, a lighthouse for individuals that are basically on this little boat in the rough waters, about to crush into these massive rocks. And then you can lure them back to shore by inspiring them, by giving them knowledge, a foundation with the prerequisite. They just pass it on to the next generation. They don't just give it to themselves, they pass it on, and they just lubricate the world with more knowledge.
Amazing. See, it's crazy how messed up the system is, everything you just described, how we went from when people were independent and adding value into the system where everybody's trapped right now. So I love your mission. I love your message, because I really identify with it. And I think more people need to hear this. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to be an entrepreneur, but you also have to be an investor as well too.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, most entrepreneurs aren't very good investors.
That's another thing we need to talk about right now to help people out with that aspect.
Yeah, and it's true, because most individuals, I actually came from the investing background, and I sort of reverse engineered back into entrepreneurialism, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
But then once you've made your money, once you're investing, the hardest thing is keeping it.
Yeah.
Which is what I call the power up phase, which is, how to amplify energy, how to amplify your exuberance, being invigorated about life, being excited about life. Mm-hmm. Because life has a habit, you're either in groove or it's cacophony and you're out of sync. And it happens sometimes, and you don't look after whether it's your weight or whether it's your health. It only takes one misstep, for example, and you can just lose it all, if you don't know how to protect yourself. And it's so important, because, look, I say to people, it's easier to make money than to keep it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And having said that, whilst we're talking about money, it doesn't take money to make money, but it does take money to invest.
That's right.
And I'm the type of investor that, and I tell everybody, never have money sitting in a bank account, because it basically shows a lack of what? Investment knowledge. Whatever money's come in, I want these monies always deployed in the marketplace. Always deployed, doing something, generating something. Because if you just leave it in a normal sized bank account with your financial institution, for example, inflation, the true rate of inflation, that invisible assassin eroding the purchasing power of your dollar, for example, the real rate of inflation is about 7%. So if you're not generating at least a minimum of 7% every year, then you're going backwards.
Yep.
So think of individuals, they have no idea how to invest. They're making money. They're leaving money in a savings account. It's being eroded. They're generating 0% interest because of lack of understanding, fear, interpretation, fear of the great unknown, which is probably the biggest fear for most people, the fear of the unknown. Mm-hmm. But let me tell you, if you knew with absolute certainty that you could do something, would you fear it? Of course not. But once again, too, it's also confidence in yourself, who you are, your ability over here, but also being in the orbit of individuals, once again, individuals that can transmit that frequency that you can lock into and be inspired and have, just having role models. I mean, because I grew up, I didn't really have any mentors as such. All my mentors were basically authors, and they had written books back in the 1920s and 1930s. In fact, one of my first books, which is a great book for any of the other viewers watching this right now, and you can probably get this free on the internet. It's called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles. It was written in 1910, wow. about 20 years before Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill.
I didn't know that book. What's the name again?
Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles. I'll text it to you afterwards, and you can just So Wallace D. Wattles, The Science of Getting Rich.
All right.
Yeah, great book, great book.
Excellent.
And you can download it for free. But it was just one of those books. I mean, for me, I actually, somebody had a physical copy of that, and I actually read that around the same year that I read Think, Grow Rich. Yeah.
Brilliant.
But, and I gravitate towards books that were written back in the early 1900s, because they're timeless, they're universal principles, and they still relate to what we have today in this modern world of business.
Yeah.
Where we're not really fully optimized, where we've been sold a bill of goods with a no refund policy, and with zero financial literacy. We're basically spat into the workforce, and with all best intentions, with all the greatest hopes, and we want to make a good impression on ourselves and go out there and set forth and build a monument to our existence.
That's right.
But then we sort of realize, wow, 95% of what I was taught in academia has nothing to do with the outside
Not
world.
much use. Yeah. I
Yeah,
know.
exactly. And it just happens in life, and that's why sometimes you need to be a contrarian and deviate from the conventional thinking, which I despise. And
We do.
basically pave your own path and just go out there. And the thing is, never compare yourself to anybody else, because even if you compare yourself to somebody else, you're still in their realm of thinking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just be. I mean, and sometimes and this is really interesting too. I don't look at my news feed on Facebook anymore. I haven't done so for a number of years. I find when people monitor the news feed of other individuals, then their thinking is basically encapsulated in the same zone, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Because if that is your comfort zone, then this is where the magic happens over here.
Exactly.
So don't look at other people's news feeds. They're more than welcome to be inspired by you, but just work on being original, unique, fascinating, interesting. But you get that through travel. You get that through it's a different level of thinking. And I find specifically now with social media, there's too many individuals thinking the same way. And I think there's just a lack of originality out there in the marketplace. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. I think that's a good lesson to follow. I try to look at my newsfeed a lot less than I used to, because it just sucks you in sometimes with a lot of useless things. What I do pay attention to when I'm looking at my Facebook is whenever I see an ad, I look at the ad and see, okay, how can I model that for my ads? So I use it as a research tool. What are people advertising?
You can do that. You can do a screenshot. Basically go in there,
That's right.
see the funnel over here, and if you want to see the behind the scenes,
That's
you get your
right.
credit card out and you make a purchase.
Yeah.
But
That's it.
but look, but you see a lot of those. There's a lot of those type of ads too. But it all comes down to you've got to be happy.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, you need your health. I mean, I plan to be around for a very long time. I plan to be a centenarian. I already know that. My grandparents were both centenarians on both sides, so it runs in our family. So, but I also want my health too. I want to experience life. I mean,
Of course.
I've been to 150 countries. I've got 45 more, but there's still so much that I want to do still, irrespective. And do I do crazy things? Do I do things that you'll never tell your mother? That's me every day. But I think, sometimes when you look at what is death, I mean, sleeping in an active volcano for some people is very, very dangerous. Well, I live in Los Angeles. There are some areas in Los Angeles where it's more dangerous than than sleeping in an active volcano. So you need to relate to life, and you got to go out there.
Would you say that's one of the craziest things you've done? I mean, what is, from your adventures, what is the craziest thing you've done other than sleeping in an active volcano?
There's been a lot. I mean, diving down 5-6 miles to have lunch on the Titanic, and then the submersible is taking in water. We're leaking. We have a large support system of about 25 hours, but 24 hours in total. And it takes about 5 hours to get down to the bottom. We spend 10 hours down there. and it takes about 6 hours to get back to the surface over here. So having 3 hours spare oxygen, anything could have gone wrong down there. There's nobody else to help us. There's no chain, there's no tether. You open up the ballast tanks, you take on seawater, and you sink all the way down to the bottom of the ocean. 6 miles deep. It's like 8-9 kilometers.
Yeah. Wow.
But you know what? That's what life is. Life's going to be exciting. There's this gravitation. I have this gravitational pull to excitement. Because I'm a very energetic individual, and if I did drugs, I'd be very dangerous.
I'm sure you would be. So don't. You don't need it.
I'm just like I said, I'm high on life. I'm high on energy because I just, I love the challenges. I love hurdles. I love obstacles in life. Sometimes when I see a hurdle or an obstacle, I will always take when I go hiking, there's a path and there's another path where nobody's gone through with like climbing things. I will take that one because it's a lot more harder. I love challenges. I love walking through the gauntlet of challenges. I love to be challenged my thinking wise. When I experience hardship, look, the life of an entrepreneur, we have hardship. Sometimes, we get stuck in a cul-de-sac, and we stop moving and we're thinking, shit, what happened over here? Then you have to go back to what got you on the wealth superhighway in the first place. Because sometimes we get caught up in the minutiae over here and we lose sight of the original things that made us successful. And sometimes you have to become somewhat retrospective and go back to the original style of thinking where you had a lot more hunger. Because what happens is, and I said it with a lot of business people, is they develop a product, they start making money, and then they take their foot off the gas pedal. And then the business does this. They take their eye off the business, and then they want to get back to where they were before. And then they forgot what it took them to get back into here, to get to here in the first place. And then that's why you have a lot of individuals in life where they have this, because they lose sight of the most important things, than other things. And the more money you make, then you start being more indiscriminate and you start spending. And then you start employing more people than you really need and not understanding how the economy works, And I just see it so many times that people start getting caught out and then they start spending and spending and spending, and then their income starts to drop. And then in order to justify to make more money, they've got to keep on spending and spending and spending. And now they're into loans, they're consumer debt over here. And now they're back to square one, 20 years later, for example. And it goes back to what we spoke about before, making money and keeping your money. Making money is a lot easier than actually keeping it, because when you keep your money, guess what? When you make money, then you're a target. You basically, everybody wants a piece of you now.
That's true.
Everyone's pitching. Everyone's promoting something to you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of unscrupulous individuals out there in the marketplace. And it comes back to just 101 understanding about human psychology. So I tell people, understand about personality. Have people do like a personality test, human psychology, know how to read individuals. What's their agenda? What exactly do they want? That's
good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the keeping your money and making it work for you. You're a very, very savvy investor, and I know that firsthand. You've made me some money already with a few things we've done. So I know that what you do works, and you know it. So what do you recommend people who are listening and they're just getting started with their business? They're starting to see the money coming in, their hard-earned cash.
Yeah.
Where do they put it? Where would you put it? Or where do you recommend people put it so that it doesn't get affected by a crisis, and also so that they start seeing that passive income come in?
Yeah, definitely. Look, when you start talking about passive income, first up is we've got growth investments, and then we've got momentum. Momentum is a lot more aggressive, higher yield, but also has a lot of speculation. So there could be some spectacular returns, but you can also lose pretty much all of it. That's just the nature of very speculative style investments over here. Growth, I started with real estate back in my teenage years. I bought my first apartment. I got started in real estate over here. And I know in life, there's about 4 things that will always be recession proof. Shelter, food, water, and energy. We're all going to need some form of energy, whether it's gas or whether it's geothermal, whether it's hydro dams, or whether it's solar, water, land for agriculture wise, and shelter. Because, and I'll give an example, right? Like right now in the United States, in the coming years too, there's going to be about 105 million Americans renting. So, I like multi-family apartment buildings. I don't particularly like a single-family home, because as a single-family home investment, if you lose your tenant, now you've lost 100% of your rent.
Yeah.
So very risky, right? So multi-family, for example, you could, like, if you're going to get started, maybe like a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex with 4 units in a building. I mean, there are certain cities in America where you can buy like a fourplex for like, $60,000 or $70,000, and each one can achieve like, $600 a month. So now you got $2,400 a month. Assuming you got $1,000 in mortgage repayments, that's $1,400 passive per month, for example. Okay, so let's say you buy another 4. Now you've got $2,800 rent passive. So the idea is you're providing shelter over here, you're getting capital appreciation. And look, and one thing about real estate, I love real estate. I never buy brand new. I always buy existing, dilapidated, something that I can actually add value to. When I purchase something, see, here's the most important thing, and in everything that I do in life, it's got to have this type of criteria: the profits in the purchase. So if I'm acquiring a business, the profit's got to be in the purchase. If I'm buying real estate, I never buy brand new, because where's the profit? The profit has to be in the purchase.
Okay.
And I'm going to buy below market value. And if I can't add at least 25% or increase the valuation by 25%, I won't invest in that real estate. So if I were to come in 10% below market, and if I increase the valuation by 25%, that's already 35% skin in the game. And what if I come in with a 20% cash deposit? Now I've got at least 50% skin in the game.
Yeah.
Raise the rent as the value goes up. And then what I do now, I borrow from that and I invest in more real estate and more real estate. And the great thing about real estate is this: I'll tell you what it is: the ability to borrow against that particular asset. And I can borrow at 3 or 4% interest rates.
That's good.
And if I access monies, what can I do with that money now? I can invest that money in other sectors that can give me a 20% or a 30 or a 40% return. What is the cost of the interest borrowings on that money? 3%. But I can, so in other words, it's arbitrage investing. So I'm borrowing at 3 or 4% against the asset of the real estate. And then I'm actually investing in other sectors that can give me a far more significant ROI. Right. So that's basically another way of creating free money.
Brilliant.
But it's, once again, it's understanding, having the confidence in the strategies, but also understanding how money works. But also, with real estate, I manipulate the valuations by increasing the valuations by what? Renovating. And look, I've been renovating real estate now for 30 years. I got started as a young teenager, and I basically built a cookie cutter system where all my rentals, all my investment real estate looks exactly the same inside. The criteria. You
got a system now.
Yeah. Look, I know the engines. The engine is the kitchen and the bathroom over here. It's the landscaping. Where possible, I add extra bedrooms over here so I can increase the rent. Changing the front door, having a new letterbox. It's curbside appeal. It's, and what I do is I always, with my real estate, it's all got whiteboards. It's got a microwave. It's got free Wi-Fi. It's got free cable television. It's got a refrigerator. So think about this, right? So you get a rental, the Wi-Fi is paid for, the cable television is paid for, and it's got whiteboards in there. What am I doing here? Life is all about what? Probability here. If you're going to have an amazing offer, like on ClickFunnels, for example, you're going to overload it with what? Bonuses. So you make it what? Irresistible over here.
Genius.
So I want to change the control of the conversation. I want to change the control of the passage of money which actually flows. So it's all about probability. I despise ambiguity. I want to be in control. As a typical Taurian, I'm a Taurian. I'm a Davido, I'm a bull. I'm born in May, So we like control. In fact, there's 2 things in life that I cannot control: weather and traffic. Most people say death and taxes, right?
Yeah.
You can manipulate death and you can manipulate taxes by reducing the amount you pay, legally that is. But the point is, I can't control weather and I can't control traffic. But everything else in my life, I have some degree of control. So that's the kind of person I want to be in control of it over here. My surroundings over here, my life. I mean, I trust my own instincts, for example. I don't want to be reliant on government. I don't want to be reliant on government welfare. That's just financial diabetes. I mean, how many individuals die at 21 and they get buried at 75 years of age? That's bullshit. I'm going to create my own economy. There's the economy of the government in your own country, but there's also your own economy. And when you create your own economy, you're an entrepreneur. You get paid to think. You never get paid by the you don't get paid by the hour.
Mm-hmm.
You're creating your own stimulus plan. In America, millions and millions of individuals get paid by the hour. They're not entrepreneurs. They're not investors. They've got student loan debts. They've got 3 or 4 or 5 credit cards. They don't travel. And effectively, their health everything in life takes a big toll on them. Because, we know what happens in life, in your 20s, you're ambitious. You're very ambitious. You got drive, but you're making a lot of mistakes. In your 30s, you have a little bit more wisdom because you've learned some valuable lessons from your mistakes where you've lost money in the past. In your 40s, people think differently now because they're not as adventurous as they were in their 30s. They're a little bit more conservative now with their thinking because they don't want to lose the money they made in their 30s.
That's right.
And they take the foot off the gas pedal over here. So now they contract their thinking or they downsize where they're living or the apartment or the house, for example, And having kids would change the paradigm shift now because now you're producing liabilities. In a spiritual sense, they're an absolute asset. But these little kids are financial liabilities because they cost money to get them to a point where they now become assets. And I tell every parent, don't send your kids to school. Travel school them and they'll become a faster asset for you at age 16. And when your kids become an asset, it's passive income for you. Why? Because if you're giving them everything in life, business, entrepreneurialism, knowing how to invest, take 10% of their future earnings. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Passive income. Think of that, right? If you're giving them everything in life, not just money handouts, because you're teaching bad lessons. You're teaching liabilities, whatever you. But if you equip them and they become an asset, they'll be multimillionaires by age 21. And you as a parent, a pat on the back, you take 10% clip on their future earnings.
That's a good deal. That's a really good deal.
And you know what? Then you have all these parents who are going to start having more kids.
No, but that's amazing. Isn't there a book about that?
I don't know, but if there's no book out there, someone should write about it, about monetizing, making your kids an asset and taking a percentage of their. I mean, I've been saying it for years, but if there's a book, let me know which book it is. If there's not a book, I'm going to write about it.
Yeah.
How to raise kids, how to make your kids an asset working for you. Passive income, baby.
No, what I mean is there's a book about, I think it's called, no, it's not called The Selfish Gene, but it just says that everybody has kids for selfish reasons. So what I mean is, if you have kids because you want to monetize them, it's because in the end, you're having them for you. So anyway, I haven't read the book, but it sounds interesting.
Now, if you're going to have kids, it's more about adding value to their lives.
Exactly.
Because you don't want your kids to struggle in life. I mean, some people have kids because it's the accepted thing to do in life when you're in your 30s or your 40s.
Because we're supposed to be having them.
Exactly. I want to have kids so I can add value to their lives. Once again, too, if I'm adding value to a client's life or adding value to my own child's life, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
The knowledge, but the rules are the same. Whatever I teach you, you pass on the knowledge.
Yeah.
If you become an asset, then you teach others how to become an asset as well, too. What you're doing, you're just lubricating the world and showing the love and the passion of what? Living life in your own terms and conditions.
Yeah, just share.
Yeah.
So I wanted to move on to another topic that's been It's been causing some controversy lately, I guess. The whole cryptocurrency thing. I would really love to hear your take on the current
Yep.
state of it.
Yep.
Early April 2018, because this changes could
Things
change in a
changed
month.
because we had a discussion in January.
We
Do you
did.
recall?
We did. It was a
And
totally
and it,
different scenario.
yeah, and cryptocurrency is basically look every week it's evolving because it's been going through these growing pains. But what's happening is this: basically, if you entered the crypto scene last year, whether it's early 2017 or mid 2017, you're still in profit. Anybody who has entered in October, November is down
Yep.
because a lot of individuals, the speculative individuals who basically were buying Bitcoin for the sake of buying Bitcoin, FOMO, the fear of missing out, their psychology, that the human predicated emotion of what? Fear, FOMO, the fear of missing out. And these were the same speculative individuals who were hoping to have a Lamborghini by Christmas, the Lambo. But a lot of these fools that are now effectively out of the marketplace. And I think that's a good move because speculation, I tell everybody in life, better to graze through life than to overeat and become obese. Think of a farmer, think of an agricultural farmer. If there's two cows, one cow just grazes and grazes, just walks up, eats, stops, eats, walks around, sleeps, grazes for life. And the other one just keeps on eating and eating and eating and eating and eating.
Yeah.
Which cow is going to be the first one sent to the abattoir by the farmer? The one that's a pig, the one that's a greedy one, right? Greedy pigs always get slaughtered in life. Those who choose to graze are the ones who will make fabulous wealth as their wealth is compounded in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. So when it comes to cryptocurrencies here, the biggest thing that's happening right now is this. There's a lot of banking cartels that are working in tandem to manipulate the price of Bitcoin as we know it today. They are releasing bad news in tandem. They are organizing all these news feeds and news reports that are negative to Bitcoin, and they're releasing it on the same day. So every time Bitcoin goes for any particular price spike and it goes up, bang, you're going to have 5 or 6 leading news reports saying this exchange is going to be closed down, clamping down, taxes, IRS, SEC, spam, this, and then what happens? Then Bitcoin gets driven down again. So what's happening is this. 2 things are happening. They are driving the price as low as they can, and my belief is they are also buying as much as they can to be able to control it. Because if you can't destroy it, what's the best option? What's the next best option?
To join them,
control it. How do you control it? By having a majority stake.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a majority stake, and think about this, if there's 21 million coins, well, 16 million coins have been mined. There are still 5 million outstanding, okay? Now, the first 5 million Bitcoin were lost. These were individuals who bought Bitcoin in the early days, and they changed computers. They had it on their maybe they're on their old Mac, for example, or on their old iPhone 4, for example, right?
Yeah.
And they just lost it all because they didn't think that Bitcoin will get to the levels that it is today. And these were individuals who were buying Bitcoin for $1 or $2 or $3, So the first 5 million Bitcoin were just lost.
Wow.
Or hacked. I mean, I was hacked with Mt. Gox. I mean, I got hacked.
Wow.
A lot of individuals got hacked in the early days. So if the first 6 million were lost, then we've got about 9 million coins in private hands. Okay, it's only 9 million coins. Think about this. There's only 9 million coins. The rest haven't been mined as yet. So if the big banking cartels can then force individuals with negative news, so people start selling and selling and selling and selling and selling. What are you doing now? They're selling on fear. And then what they're doing is they're buying on what? Hype, speculation over here. So that's what's happening. So you've got banking cartels working in tandem so they can control the conversation. Remember, in life, anything in life, If you can control the conversation or control the sale, you control the flow of money. That's what they're doing right now. So a lot of individuals now, it's like, oh, hold. Well, for some individuals who are newbies to the marketplace, to tell them to hold as the price of Bitcoin goes down, it becomes a little hard. Specifically, if they bought the Bitcoin at 15 or 16 or 17 grand. And I was telling individuals, they were telling me, Nick, should I be buying? I'm thinking, do not buy at 15 or 16 or 17 grand. A lot of individuals which we wanted to buy them. I was telling them, get started with mining, because when you're mining, what you're doing is you're going to invest in the mining hardware, which is kind of like your goose. So, for example, I invest in real estate. I don't really give a shit about the valuations. 1 year, the valuation of the property can go up or down. But I know that every month I'm generating what? Rent.
Mm-hmm.
Don't invest in the golden egg. Invest in the goose that lays the golden eggs. That's what I'm telling people. Don't just go buy Bitcoin because you have no idea about analysis, where Bitcoin's going, where it's going. There are individuals who are buying Bitcoin at $19,000. Well, guess what? Bitcoin is 7,000 right now, as we speak right now today. From 19 to 7. Do you think they're already out of the marketplace? They've already sold. They're out.
Yeah.
And all those individuals who got caught up in the Ponzi schemes, like your BitConnects and what have you. You know, these crazy schemes promising 1% interest every day, economically unsustainable, economic stupidity. And all these individuals, and there were even individuals on my newsfeed who were promoting schemes and Ponzi schemes like that.
Terrible.
I mean, if you want to gamble, go for it. But the moment you start profiting from selling Ponzi schemes like that, I have zero respect for you. You're a piece of shit. But you know what? Those individuals who got caught out in BitConnect, for example, they honestly believed that was their last chance of financial freedom. Listen to the individuals. There's videos on YouTube, individuals that got burned and they lost their life earnings. There were individuals who took out credit cards. They took a line of credit against their assets, their real estate, or their parents' home to go and invest in BitConnect. And you know what? When they were interviewed, they said, this was my last chance of financial freedom. What do you mean your last chance? People play the lottery. 1 in 3 individuals play the lottery because they feel that's their only chance of what? Financial freedom.
Oh, naive.
They're so entrenched in the system over here. I mean, this here is anti-speculation. This here is anti-lottery. This here is anti-academia, but this is pro-life.
The 5-day weekend.
Transforming a 5-day work week into a 5-day weekend, because you see these individuals, and I say it every time. That's why I tell people, spend less time looking at the news feed over here. Work on your life. Look inward. As you start to shape your thinking, all you're doing is you're going to amplify the signal in your outside world. Every tree, this tree over here, has a root system. Spend more time on the nutrients on the root system, and it will manifest lush and green and the sort of rainforest vibe. And I'll tell anybody, look, be a gardener of the mind. Start to cultivate your thinking. The right gardener can turn a desert into a rainforest by just changing the thinking here, which will then obviously manifest itself in the real world over here. So spend more time, on the nutrients. And nutrients is what? It could be knowledge. It could be looking after your health, keeping your energy levels up, expanding your bandwidth of thinking, expand the runway of your thinking. In other words, the runway of your thinking encapsulates your ambition, your drive, being invigorated about life, your enthusiasm, your exuberance. If you're not excited about life, why should anybody be excited about you? Yep. If you don't think you're unique enough, then what have you really got to offer? What's your body of work? What's your legacy? What brings a tear to your eyes? What brings a smile to your face?
Powerful.
Yeah.
That's it.
We're covering a lot of tangents here. I'm getting all emotionally worked up.
I know.
Why are you doing this to me?
No, I love it. I love your energy, and I hope people are going to enjoy this. So to close the crypto topic, I just want to know, what are your predictions
Yeah,
right now for the next couple months?
basically there's a lot of this. Okay, so there's these banking cartels that are working in tandem
Yes.
to basically negate and take the steam, to make sure there's a lot of fear. They want enough people to be selling and selling and selling and selling. And what they're doing is this. They know I look cryptocurrencies and blockchain is the future. Whether Bitcoin is going to be the Facebook, we don't know that. Bitcoin can be Friendster or MySpace. We still don't know that.
True.
But this is what I know. In 1996, with operating systems, we had Windows and we had Netscape, okay? We had all these platforms over here, right? In 1998, Amazon came out. In 1998, Google was one of 18 search engines. And then the year 2000, we had the big tech bust. And all these tech companies over here pretty much imploded. So when you look at this, right, where we are right now with cryptocurrencies is where we were with the tech boom in 1996. So we're still 2 years before the Googles and the Amazons. That's where we are right now. Mm-hmm. And we don't know whether, like I said, whether Bitcoin's going to be, the MySpace or the Facebook of the future. We still don't know that. But the signs are promising. The transaction costs are coming down. The speed of the implementation of transaction, it's getting faster, which is great news. But you do have all these banking cartels that are working in synergy to keep the price subdued. But what I do know is there are billions of dollars waiting on the sidelines. A lot of money on Wall Street and a lot of hedge funds. And my belief is they want to keep on putting pressure on the price to possibly even lower than $6,000, so they can bring in and then control the conversation.
Of course.
That's what's going to happen, to control the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I said it when we last chatted in January, the Trojan horse is possibly a coin within the banking system, but also Amazon or Facebook having its own type of token that can be correlated back to shopping back on the ecosystem or utilizing as per marketing dollars.
I'm still waiting for that.
Sort of tokenize, yeah, where you sort of gamifying the experience over here. I mean, that's my look, and obviously, in life, do your own due diligence in light of your own financial knowledge. But this is just my opinion, obviously. But I've been all in this particular space for some time. But having said that, you need to build your foundation. Build your foundation over here, consolidate your foundation with some goals out over here, some conservative investments over here, passive, and then utilize some of this money here to invest in the more speculative, higher yield type investments like cryptocurrencies. But don't go all in. If you want to get started with cryptocurrencies, do not buy the coin. Better to start with mining Bitcoin, because that way you've got a goose. So irrespective of the price, you're still generating Bitcoin on a daily basis through owning mining hardware, not cloud mining. We're talking about physically owning mining hardware, where you physically own the equipment. You can either keep the equipment in your own house and mine it, or you can be smart for more profitability, reducing your costs by hosting it at a data farm or a data facility where the cost of electricity is very, very cheap. Mm-hmm. That's the name of the game right now. But like I said, if you bought your Bitcoin for less than $7,000, you're still in profit right now. Anybody who paid more than $7,000, you're hurting right now. And those people who bought it for 17 or 18 or 19, the fear of missing out. Remember that psychology of fear. And the human modality, and look, the fear of losing money is greater than the greed of making money.
You got it. And it's amazing how a few months ago, our Facebook timelines were filled with crypto experts, quote unquote, crypto experts. Yeah. And now they all disappeared. Nobody's talking.
They bought the first fraction of a Bitcoin and they became overnight experts in selling courses, whatever too. But you know what? I give analysis. I talk to my clients. I do like a webinar with clients, helping them what to do. And I'm telling you, if I was you, I would do this, because it's better to mine and to be generating it than to go out there just buying it. And unless you have a very good understanding of analysis, you see, I was a futures and a derivatives trader for most of my teenage years in my early 20s. So I understand charts. I know how to understand the intersection of human emotion on a particular chart. So I look at my charts. I know what's happening over here. I have a greater understanding. And when you look at a human chart, of whether it's Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash or any of the some of the other altcoins, it's like looking under the hood of the engine and seeing if there's oil, if there's transmission fluid, if there's water in the radiator, if every spark plug is working. That's what I'm doing when I look at the analysis over here. I mean, if I looked under the engine and there was no water in the transmission, there's no oil, how far is that engine going to go before it does what? It breaks down. So in December, Bitcoin was like that. It was operating and there was no oil in the engine, because it was all what? Speculation. Yeah. It was all speculation. A lot of individuals, and it was crazy, but real estate, like I said, you've got to be a long-term player. One of the biggest things I've always done is this. Always look for long-term gratification, not short-term gratification. Play the long game. A lot of individuals, they think short-term only.
Yeah.
So for me, it's going to be long-term. What's going to be the best? What's going to serve this investment best? Real estate is a long-term game. A lot of these individuals who were going into crypto in November, December, they just wanted a Lamborghini. They had no idea what Bitcoin was or how the blockchain worked. All they wanted was materialism. They wanted greed, and they wanted a Lamborghini by Christmas. Short-term gratification will always bite you in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Didn't work out for them.
No.
I wanted to ask you one more thing. I remember when we were at the mastermind last year, beginning of 2017, and my students there, they were very, very impressed with the drawing you did of the cycle. And with the seasons.
There's a whole chapter in the book.
Oh my God, yeah.
Those cycles. So for those that love that, it's in the book.
The economic cycles. I would just love to hear where are we at in the cycle right now? And it's been 10 years since the last big, the 2008 crisis, which I think it's still going. It's just not. Where are we at there as well? Like, what's going to happen the rest of the year, and where are we at in the cycle?
I'm gonna give you my perspective from an American perspective, okay? So I believe by 2020, we're going to be around 12 to 1 o'clock. And basically, that's where the economy is going to be way, way too overheated. And then the economy is going to drop significantly. It'll probably drop like 15, 20%. But I believe the economy still has probably up to 2 more years of being lubricated. I believe property prices will continue to climb and then start to consolidate. So I think that's where we are. And what normally happens is, whatever happens in the United States, then you have that ripple effect, which then affects the rest of the world. But I believe right now, we're about 10 o'clock. Yeah. So
10 o'clock. Is it a good time for what? For investing, for selling, for?
I would say I wouldn't be looking at buying, until 2020, for example. Because right now, if 9 o'clock is economic spring, think of this. So we've already passed spring. 12 o'clock is summer, economic summer, where everything is completely overheated, right?
Yeah.
So now we're approaching summer, and so I believe we're going to reach the pinnacle of summer within the next 2 years. And effectively, what I normally do is I wait for 3 o'clock, which is economic autumn. So think of economic autumn, it's the first signs. What happens with economic autumn? The leaves start to fall off the branches. Economic spring is new growth, right? Think of, correlate investing back to the seasons of life as we know it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're about 10 o'clock. We're fast approaching 12 o'clock. I believe we'll probably reach that 12 o'clock, I will say probably 2020. And once again, too, it's, yep, there's a time to be buying and there's a time to be selling. Within the next 9 to 12 months, it would be a phenomenal time to sell if you're selling, because there'd be greater demand. Because when people make more money, they have a greater willingness to do what? To spend it. And when they do spend it, they're more willing to overpay. Because of what? The fear of missing out. Just like Bitcoin, November last year, where it went from 15 to 17 to 18 to 19 within 3 weeks. The fear of missing out.
Powerful.
That's where we are. But always correlated back to human psychology over here. Economic summer, economic autumn, economic winter, economic spring. Right now we're 10 o'clock, so we've already passed spring. Between 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock, great times to buy real estate. Because remember what I said before with property. The profit is in the what? The purchase. You don't buy property with the hope it's going to go up in value. The profit has to be in the purchase. And that's a really important distinction. That's where everybody gets it wrong. People buy property because they think, oh yeah, it'll go up in the future. No, the profit's day one. Put it this way, I will not buy property if I can't buy and sell it and make a profit on the same day. If I was to sell it, that is. That's how you know when to buy the right property. Mm-hmm. You don't buy property hoping to make a profit in the future. Why? Because it's hope. It's ambiguity. I want control. If I'm going to control the purchase, then the profit's got to be in the purchase from day one. And if I can't add 25% to the market valuation of the property by renovating it, I won't buy it either. It's like a business, same thing, right?
Yeah.
Remember, you can always improve the product and the service.
I would say that that's one of the most important things you've said in the entire call, and I hope people got that. And that applies to real estate and any other market, I think.
Value factor everything you do in life. Yeah. Value factor a client. Value factor real estate. Value factor your property portfolio. Always value factor, which means you're basically adding value.
Mm-hmm. Value factor. Yeah. Powerful.
And then I guess the opposite of that is spend your factor. Not that the word exists, but I just created just then. A lot of individuals indiscriminate spending because they're just spending with money they can't afford to what? To lose over here. That's why when you're out there, use a debit card. Don't you always use a credit card? Apply the 5-second rule. I mean, America right now has this epidemic of storage units. A lot of individuals where they place boxes and junk and crap in their garage. Very seldom do you go to a garage and just see a car. Normally you see all these boxes all the way to the ceiling over here. Meaning, when there's no more shit in the house, they put in the garage. And when the garage is full of shit, they then get a storage unit. It's consumer-led capitalism over here. It's buying anything which is made in China. Why? Because China produces what? Shit for the rest of the world. That's why China has become fabulously wealthy, selling shit to the Americans. Because right. Americans are addicted to what? Buying cheap shit. And this is just consumerism over here. Look, when you buy something, always treat it like an antique. If you're going to buy something, if you're going to keep it for 20 or 30 or 40 years, if it's very, very unique, for example, don't just buy something for the sake of buying it. Because they're always in the rubbish bin or in a box or in a storage unit.
And you're paying for the storage.
Exactly. That is the plight of the average American. And that's why the middle class in this country has been assassinated. Why? Because of their thinking, because they don't have a stimulus plan, they don't have their own economy. They're reliant on government subsidized welfare programs, financial diabetes. And you know what? They've got financial diabetes in the 20s and the 30s, and then by age 60, they've got financial cancer. And then they retire with no savings, nothing in a 401k, and within 10 years of retirement, they're dead.
That's the truth.
Because they had no why, they had no power, they had no reason to live. They just lived off small little rations. That's not a way to live. Our ancestors lived better. They used to thrive. They had purpose every day. They would run 20, 30 miles to find food. They were always fit, cardiovascular-wise, yes?
Yeah.
They had purpose. These days, we just wait for everything to come to us. We become just like this sloth generation, or even like these millennials in the United States where they basically feel entitled to everything for free, for free, for free.
Yep. Entitlement is a big problem right now with the
It is
younger
because
generation.
they were promised the world. And then they realize, hold on here, the real world is very different to the way that our parents sold it to us, or the way our politicians sold it to us, you know? And then you got politicians saying, I'm going to be a jobs president, jobs, jobs, jobs. How about somebody saying, you know what, I'm going to be a president fostering entrepreneurialism. I'm going to be an entrepreneur president, not a jobs president, because there's entrepreneurs, but every entrepreneur is going to employ 20 or 30 or 40 other individuals. The country is built on entrepreneurialism, not on just jobs. More financial literacy. Here's my take. Teach more people how to make more money and then charge more taxes on them. Perfect.
Win-win.
Exactly. What a great way to make more money for the government. Teach more entrepreneurialism, they're making more money, you tax more money. Done. If you keep everybody like this, only 45% of them are going to pay taxes. Incredible. But don't get me started. And don't encourage me to run for politics.
I was just going to say that. Nik Halik for president.
Yeah, I love politics. My father was very politically minded too. So my father was very different to me. I'm a compassionate capitalist. I mean, I'm a libertarian capitalist. My father was actually a communist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so very, very different. He was a typical socialist. Yeah, he was a typical socialist. So we were always
you would clash, I guess.
Absolutely, definitely,
What about your mother?
But,
that doesn't happen with your mother. Do you clash?
No, she wasn't too political, but she just had a heart of gold. Yeah, heart of gold, man. Like, yeah, my best friend, definitely. Heart of gold. But mothers are like that too, Plus, your mother should be that guiding light in your life sometimes, But sometimes a lot of kids, they don't get enough inspiration at home. And the parents are not really inspiring them enough. And unfortunately, kids then have to turn to their friends for inspiration. And let's say those friends are really just the biggest losers in the world, right? And what sort of inspiration is that for the kids?
A lot of times.
And if you send your kids to school, well, academia is not going to teach them financial literacy, nothing about business, branding, products, marketing, and they become a product of what? Of the system. And then they go in the real world, now they've got student loan debt, and they're going to get a job. And now they're 27, 28 years of age, disillusioned, and they go from job to job to job, which is no different to most people in life going from shiny object to shiny object to shiny object, right?
That's right.
The same thing.
Same thing. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's the same cycle is basically perpetuated, And it's the same individuals because they're very low on emotional intelligence. See, I tell any parent right now, forget about IQ. Focus on EQ. Your EQ is your emotional intelligence. It's your foundation, your self-esteem, and your belief system. Forget about IQ. IQ can wait. Build the IQ on top of EQ, not the other way around. That's why you have a lot of incredibly smart individuals with zero social skills, low self-esteem. But those who have high emotional EQ are the ones who are able to rationalize issues and problem solve. They're able to give vent to their emotions and talk about the hurdles and obstacles and find what? Find solutions. So always work on emotional EQ, then stack the IQ.
Beautiful.
And it goes back, and you can start to see how that basically shapes our adult life, how we make our decisions in our 20s and the 30s and the 40s, which stems from, did we have high EQ or low EQ? It's amazing how every obstacle, every hurdle goes back to the way we were raised, childhood ways. Yeah.
Yes.
And our parents didn't know any better. Our parents didn't know any better. For them, they were conditioned, hey, go out there, get a job, raise your kids, and put them through what? University. Yeah.
That's what we did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Nik, thank you so much for your time, for your words, for your passion, your energy. It's contagious, and I hope people can get that feeling from you. I definitely get it every time I talk to you. I appreciate your insights. I'm sure this is going to cause an impact in a lot of people. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And for your time, of course. And I don't know if you have any last words of encouragement for anybody listening or watching.
Wow, last words, just, get out there, for life. One movie that I just loved growing up was Ferris Bueller. And Ferris Bueller, it's become a big cult movie.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Something that Ferris Bueller said, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around, you're going to miss it. So for me, I just, a crazy, funny movie, very cult-like. But those words, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around, you are going to miss it. So that is my that's my words of wisdom for the day.
Love it.
Courtesy of Ferris Bueller.
Love the message. Love the message.
Awesome.
Thank you, my friend. I look forward to see you again soon. And thanks to everybody who stuck with us through the entire interview. Hope you guys got value. Be sure to share it with your people, with your networks. Lots of golden nuggets in here. Thank you, Nik, so much. I'll see you again.
Thank you very much,
soon.
everybody. Cheers.